Hi, everybody. Nathan Ronan, CFA here with a very special kind of update for primarily level one candidates. But if you're a level two or level three, you'd probably like to listen into this fixed income update. What I'm doing here is I'm actually going to be showing primarily the level one candidates a topic here on fixed income. And hopefully you'll not only learn a lot as a level one candidate, but you might even pick up a couple things, kernels, as a level two or level three. Now, I don't expect the question that I'm going to do or the topic that I'm covering to show up on the level two or the level three exam, but hey, you never know what you can learn, and knowledge is cumulative, so maybe some aspects of it could show up on a level two or level three exam. But again, this is primarily for level one. And what I'd like to do here is I'd like to go through this problem, okay, on fixed income. And then after we do it together, I want to talk about, what aspect of it could be asked on the exam. Could all of it be asked on the exam? Part of it be asked on the exam, or one particular component out of everything that I've done, so that you could see how questions are structured for the CFA exam and why a lot of times candidates may not be able to provide the answer that the CFA Institute is looking for, or when they have a choice A, B, or C, they choose the second best answer. So if you'd like to continue listening to this, what I suggest is please press the subscribe button now and then the notifications button so that you can continue to receive these updates and some of these examples that I do, as well as other types of advice or help that I give to CFA candidates preparing for the level one, level two, and level three exams. Okay. Let's start out this example, this hypothetical example. Choose a name. Maria Suarez. Nathan, where'd you get that name from? Not a former candidate of mine, not a current candidate, not somebody that I dated back in high school that crushed my heart. I'm just kidding. No, I'm just making up the name. Anyway, I do like to have fun with these videos too, so I hope you're smiling. Anyway, let's say Maria Suarez today purchases a 5% annual coupon paying bond, meaning that the coupons will be paid 5% of par. Par is also known as the stated value or the face value of the bond, 5% of par, which is 100 on an annual basis, so one time a year. It's a 30-year bond, okay? And the current price when she bought it today is 86.24. Okay, par being 100, she bought it for 86.24. So obviously she bought it at a discount, and she's intending to hold it for 11 years. Only her holding period is 11 years. It's not going to be the whole 30 years of the maturity of the bond. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to calculate, and the exam has asked you these kinds of questions before, to calculate the horizon return, also known as the horizon yield, over this time period that she's holding the bond, which is 11 years. What is she actually making over the 11-year time period? Okay. Now, to go through this problem is going to take a few steps on your part. Number one, you have to calculate the yield to maturity on the bond at the time of issuance, at the time that she purchased it, which was at issuance. When she bought it at 86.24, what was the yield to maturity on the bond at that time? That's a very critical thing to know. I didn't give it to you in this problem, so we need to calculate it. So first is to calculate the yield to maturity on the bond at the time of issuance. The second step that we need to calculate is during the 11-year holding period, she is going to receive coupons every year. Year 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through year 11, she's going to receive coupons of 5% of the par value of 100. Fine. And each of those 5% coupons are going to be assumed to be reinvested. At what? Well, in this problem, and you might want to notate this down, is that one of the conditions is that the yield curve is flat and that she will be reinvesting the coupons at 1% higher than the yield to maturity at the time that the bond was issued. In other words, right after she purchased it, yields went up by 1%. Okay, so that is going to be the rate that she reinvests the coupon over the remaining years that she holds the bond. Great. So that's step number two, is to come up with the value of the reinvested coupons at the horizon date. And then the third component that we need to calculate is what is the value of the bond when she wants to sell it at year 11, okay? Which means that there's going to be 19 years more remaining on the bond. So we're going to need to come up with the present value of the bond at year 11 based on all of the cash flows from year 11 all the way to year 30, which is again the coupons and then the principal, the return of principal. Okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves and let's figure out how to do this. Okay, one step at a time. Step number one, as I said, is to calculate the yield to maturity on this bond. Again, the data that you should have in front of you. Now look, I don't have a PowerPoint slide here. Oh my God, he's not doing PowerPoints. People, you're not going to have PowerPoints on the exam. You're going to have the data points in front of you. You're going to have to use your calculators. You're going to have to do the example. I realized that in high school and college, teachers were using PowerPoints. I do use PowerPoints sporadically in my videos, but I'd rather talk it out because I find that when people are consumed with PowerPoints, they're focusing on the PowerPoint, and they're not listening to any of the teaching, the lecture, or the knowledge that's being imparted. So this way we're talking to each other and or I could say more, I'm talking, you're listening, but we're communicating together and you're learning the material instead of just focusing all the time on PowerPoints and making sure that you're getting all the numbers down. So again, to rehash, it's a 5% annual coupon paying bond. Par value is 100. She bought it at issuance at 86.24. She's holding it for 11 years. It's a 30-year bond. And the day after or at the time of purchase, when she purchased that bond, yields suddenly went up by 1%. Now, that actually shows you that this bond is selling at a discount, right? Because the yield to maturity is going to be higher than the coupon rate. Whenever the yield to maturity is higher than the coupon rate, the bond will be selling at a discount from par. Why? Because the yield to maturity is the market rate of interest at the time the bond was issued. Okay, so if market interest rates are higher than 5%, let's say 8%, for example, just throwing 8% out there, then what's happening is a bond of similar risk, similar maturity, and comparable to this bond should be offering a coupon of 8%. This bond is only offering a coupon of 5%. So the only way people are going to buy this bond is if it is sold to them at a discount. Why would you want to pay $100 for a bond with 5% when you can pay $100 and get a bond with 8% in the market right now? So this bond is trading or is going to sell at a discount from par, which is 86.24. So again, let's do step number one, which is to calculate the yield to maturity at the time of issuance. Now, the way you can do this is very simply. You can take your financial calculators. You're entitled to have a financial calculator with you at the level 1, level 2, or level 3 exam. And you can either use the HP12C, I believe it is, or the TIBA 2 Plus, different versions of it. But that's not the point we're getting through here. Whichever calculator you like of those two brands, and you can actually calculate the yield to maturity by using your bond functions. Okay, so what you would do here is you would say, okay, what do I know about this bond right now? I need to calculate the yield to maturity at the time of issuance. In other words, I need to calculate I. So what I'm going to do is I know that this bond is a 30-year bond, so N is equal to 30. I also know that the payment, the annuity, the cash flows that I'm getting every period, even if I hold that bond for 30 years, is 5% or 5% of par. If par is 100, so that's like $5. The price of the bond right now is 86.24, so that would be the present value. And then I know that the future value of this bond is that the bond has to converge to par at maturity over 30 years, so it's going to converge to 100, which is the future value. Okay. Now, if you put those numbers into your calculator, you should get 6%. That the yield to maturity at the time of issuance is 6%. Hold on a second. Nathan, I'm not getting 6%. Well, it's probably because your cash flows are not positive and negative. Remember, there's inflows and outflows associated with a bond. So what you would need to do, or you should do, is one of the cash flows, the present value, should be a negative number because let's say you're paying that money out. Okay, you're paying that money out, the 86.24 to acquire the bond. and consider the 100, the future value, something that you would receive back or as an inflow at maturity if you were holding the bond to maturity. Because all you're doing is calculating the yield to maturity right now at the time of issuance. So put the 86.24 as a negative number into your calculator for the present value, and put 100 as a positive value for the future value. Payment is still 5, okay, because you are receiving those coupons, so they're like inflows. And then N is 30, and I push I, you will get 6%. Now, you were told that right after purchase, yields on bonds increased by 1%. So since the yield to maturity at the time she purchased, at the time of issuance, is 6%, now it's going to be 7%. So 7% is going to be your discount rate. Okay, that's part one. Okay, step one to solving this problem of what is the horizon return or the horizon yield over this time period that she's holding the bond, which is 11 years. Step number two. Step number two, as I told you, is to calculate the future value of all the reinvested coupons she's receiving over the 11-year holding period. So N is going to equal 11 because that's a time period she's holding the bond and getting coupons. Okay, the payment is going to be 5. Okay, you can put it in as a -5, okay, because she's going to be, reinvesting these coupons. So reinvesting means she's taking the coupon and then putting it back in. So putting it back in as an outflow, -5 for the payment. I is going to be 7% because that's your discount rate. Each of those coupons, the $5 are going to be reinvested at 7% for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years, and so on and so forth. So I is equal to 7%. The future value is what we're solving for. And then to be complete and to make sure that there's no junk in the calculator, the present value you would put in 0 because you're not doing anything with present value. You're coming up with the future value at the end of 11 years, from now to 11 years, with the reinvested coupons. If you do that again, N is equal to 11, payment key -5, present value is 0, future value is what you're solving for, and I is 7%. When you press the future value button, you should get 78.92. So 78.92 is the accumulation of all those coupons and the interest on those coupons during the holding period of 11 years. Put that 78.92 to the side. Remember that number. Now let's do step number 3. Step number 3 is to calculate the value of the bond at the horizon date, which is 11 years from now. Do we know the actual price of the bond 11 years? Oh, Ouija board. No, we don't. It's going to be whatever the market price is. But there's an assumption that we're making that this bond is going to be fairly valued. So the price and the value should be the same. But in the real world, that might not be the case. But we're going to make that assumption, just like we're making an assumption that all of the coupons are going to be reinvested at 7%. Is the yield curve flat all the time? No. But in order to do these sort of academic exercises and come up with an answer, we need to make some sweeping assumptions that don't exist in the real world. But these are helpful to you to understand the concepts in the real world and apply them. So coming back to step 3, let's calculate the value of the bond at the horizon date 11 years from now. So what do we know about this bond at the 11th year? It's got 19 years remaining until maturity because it's a 30-year bond. We know that the future value of the bond at maturity is going to be 100. At year 30, it's going to be 100 because it's going to converge to par at maturity. We also know that from year 12 all the way through year 30, we're going to get not only the principal at the end, but we're going to get that annuity of coupons, 5. And then we know that the discount rate is going to be 7%. So now we're trying to come up with the present value of the bond when, not today at time equals 0, but at year 11. We know the value of the invested coupons is 78.92. That's what we did in step 2. Now we're going to add the value of the bond at that date. Okay. So we take our financial calculators out again, and we put in N is equal to 19 because we're discounting back from year 30 to year 11. That's 19 years. N is equal to 19. We know that the payment key is going to be the coupons, right? Those 5. So you can put in 5 for that. And then the future value is 100. We could put in 100 for that. And then we could also put in I as 7%, the discount rate. And if you do that, make sure that the future value and the payment key are the 100 and the 5 are the same, the same sign, okay? Because remember, you always have to consider inflows and outflows. So think of it this way, that basically put them in as negatives. It really doesn't matter, but you can put both of them in as negatives or positives. Probably better to put them in both as negatives. And if you do that, you will get that the present value is a positive 79.33. So 79.33 is the present value at year 11 of all those future cash flows and the principal discounted back to year 11 at 7%. You will get 79.33. Now, how do we come up with the horizon return or the horizon yield over the 11-year period? What do we know? First of all, we know that the value of the bond today at time equals 0 is 86.24. We also know that there is an 11-year holding period. And we also know that at the end of the 11-year period, at the end of the 11-year period, that bond is going to have a total value of 158.25. Where did he get 158.25? Miraculously, I took the future value of the reinvested coupons of 78.92, and I added it to the present value of the bond at the end of, or at year 11, which is 79.33. 79.33 and 78.92 gives you the 158.25. So in other words, my initial investment, or I shouldn't say mine, but Maria Suarez's initial investment of 86.24, because that's what she bought the bond for, and she holds it for 11 years, is going to grow to a value of 158.25. So what's that, if you want to call it that growth rate or that horizon return that she's receiving over the 11-year period? So what you could do is you could say 86.24 times 1 plus R to the 11th equals 158.25. And from there, you would divide both sides of the equation by 86.24. So you would say 158.25 divided by 86.24. And then you would take the 11th root of that number, take the 11th root, or just raise it to the point, whatever it is, 11111, and then subtract 1 from that, and you should get 5.67%. Okay. Now, I'm assuming that you could do math, okay? I mean, if you're having trouble with the math, you can always reach out to me. I can show it to you. But the idea here is to understand a couple of things. Number one, how to calculate the yield to maturity on a bond at the time of issuance, because that is like a promised yield or an internal rate of return. They can ask that on the exam. Number two, how to calculate the future value of all the reinvested coupons, assuming a particular reinvestment rate over the horizon period of 11 years in this case, how to come up with the future value of those coupons. And number three, how to calculate the present value of the bond at the end of the horizon period. And number four, how to put it all together and come up with the horizon return. Now, one thing you're probably going to ask me is, Nathan, could they really on a level 1 exam ask me to do all that for one question? I'm going to give you an answer to that. If they do, skip it or guess B and move on. There is no way that you can do everything that we just did in a minute and a half, because all you're allocated is a minute and a half per question on the level 1 exam. So could they ask you one of the components, like the future value of the reinvested coupons or the yield to maturity or the present value of the bond at the end of the horizon date? Yes. But to do all of those cash flows and all of those functions and come up with 5.67% as the horizon yield, probably not. And if they did ask it, everybody would get it wrong, or everybody would have to guess. The only people who would probably get it right in the room are the bond traders, or the people that do bonds for a living, or people that live their life for bonds and know how to use their calculators amazingly quick. That's not the average candidate. So the answer is no, they probably wouldn't give you this question the way I just presented it, but they could ask you one of the components. And yes, you should know the components, and yes, you should know how to do each of them, but to put them all together would be very difficult in a 1.5 minute question. Why did I do this? Because I wanted to illustrate how to come up with the yield to maturity, how to come up with the future value of the reinvested coupons, how to come up with a horizon yield, and how to come up with the present value of a bond at a particular point in time. These are the kinds of things that you're going to need to master and understand to move on to level 2 and level 3, where it gets even a little bit more complicated. Now, we can make all kinds of assumptions about the reinvestment rate, that yields went up right after she bought it, or it went up after the second year or the fifth year. But again, on the exam, if they ask something similar to this, they're going to assume that the yield curve is flat. So there's going to be a one-time change in the yield curve, if any, and that's it. Okay, well, I hope you found this helpful. If you have questions, you can always come to my website, chalkandboard.org. That's CHALK and AND, board, BOARD, chalkandboard.org. Check it out. I have some examples up there, some samples. And if you have any questions, my number is up there. You can always email me. You could text me on WhatsApp or call me, and I'm happy to help you out. I'd love to have you as a level 1, level 2, or level 3 candidate. But again, I'm not your average instructor. And the way I'm teaching is I want you to understand so that you can do, I want to show you and sometimes tell you so that you know how to do it for exam purposes, not read you a bunch of PowerPoint slides. Hope you like the painting behind me. But anyway, good luck to you. And if you have any questions, reach out. And that concludes this little lesson.